Hey, so today's video, I have been wanting to make this one for a pretty long time. I have to admit, I'm a little afraid of making this one. And this video, we're going to go over a lot of make.com workflows. And this video is really intended for my team or anybody else who wants to learn how to use make.com. I am not saying that I am any kind of make.com expert, but I've learned a thing or two about make.com. This video really goes out to my team and Eric 3 years ago. I just wish this video existed to, go over the ropes of make.com, if you will. And if I had this video, it would have been a lot faster. So I'm going to try to just go over as many things as I know about make.com by showing you actual make.com workflows that we've set up. If you want to follow some other people who really have this down way more than I do, Chris Fry makes some pretty good content on make.com. And there's a gentleman named Nath Aston who I've never met before, but I would follow his stuff for make.com workflows in the beginning. And so let's jump into it. Before we jump into all of the workflows that I have lined up, I just wanted to just talk about the overall usage of make.com. So make.com is kind of like Zapier. I just find that it's more modular and it's actually cheaper. So that's why that's really why I started using make.com, was because it was cheaper, to be completely honest. But there's some things for you to just know about the platform so that you can just get it, you just hit the ground running. So the first couple things about the platform is you can have your workflows be scheduled. And so there's some workflows we have scheduled and there's some that we wait to run and we do it ourselves and all those kinds of things. And then you have these little modules here that you can add, and you can put in whatever integration you're looking for. You could just search here, and if the integration that you're trying to connect with does not exist, then you can use an HTTP request. And I've made another video on my channel about HTTP requests and webhooks. If you don't know how to use those, go search that channel. Go search my channel for that video. And so I think the other thing about the modules is you also need to use flow controls. So there's repeaters, iterators, routers, and array aggregators. And so just real quick, a repeater just repeats a workflow, and we're going to go over a workflow that uses that. The iterator is probably the most important one that you should be able to use, and hopefully we'll find a workflow to go over that. But it's essentially, if you query a API request and it comes back with 200 results, if you pass it to the next module and you're not going to be able to pass all 200 results, you need to use the iterator to take it line by line to send it. And then the array aggregator, I just used this for the first time the other day, but it's basically the opposite of an iterator. If you've got a bunch of results that you want it all to be in one input, you use this to aggregate all of those. And then router is just if you have an if-then statement. So if this data exists, send it in this workflow. And if this data exists, send it in the other workflow. And we'll definitely go over those as well. And so when you're using no-code tools, I found that when I was first starting off doing make.com, I would start doing the workflow and then I would forget the things that I needed in the beginning of the workflows. Then I have to restart it and go all the way back. So I find that whenever you're building a workflow, you have to think about, do I start this workflow by retrieving data from a database and then I'm going to be doing things with that data? Or is this workflow triggered by some other action, like a webhook being called or whatever it might be? And so when you're putting these workflows together, usually the first thing in your workflow is either going to be setting up that trigger. So you might say, hey, anytime that a form is filled, I want this workflow to happen. Then that's a perfect example of a trigger kicking off a workflow. Or you're going to have to query a database because you're enriching something or whatever it might be. So I don't know why, but whenever I was building workflows, I would always start in the middle for some reason, and I forgot about starting in the beginning. And so that's just one thing that I always made mistakes on, and I just wanted to go over that. So you have your modules here, you have your flow control, and then you've got some tools like you can get multiple variables, and you can set multiple variables, and you can wait on things, and we'll go into some of the different things that we use for this. My big other tip for using make.com that now we all have the advantage of, but 3 years ago when I was learning the platform didn't exist. ChatGPT basically knows all the answers. If you just get the $20 subscription, you could screenshot some of your problems and then put that screenshot into ChatGPT and it'll tell you what's wrong with it. The other thing too is if you go here and it says export blueprint and import blueprint, if you're working on a make.com flow, it's going to export everything in JSON. And so you can import that to ChatGPT and it still all is code, right? And so if you're really, really having a problem, you could export everything and then upload it to ChatGPT and just ask, what's wrong with all of this? And you could troubleshoot in ChatGPT and then you could bring it in here. Make.com is attempting to have like an AI tutorial thing. And I know they have app tutorials and things like that. I mean, they're pretty good, but I am very specialized in all of my automations have to do with cold email. So I just hope this helps the marketing cold email world. And so anyway, let's jump into a really, really simple workflow. And so I don't think any workflow gets simpler than this. All this workflow is doing is taking my Calendly, and I have a specific Calendly for anytime somebody books a sales call with me, and it sends it to close CRM. Now, honestly, I am in a very privileged position, possibly, but like anybody who watches this content, maybe you watch my other videos, we get a lot of leads. I don't really use the CRM, but I do want to make sure I have a database full of everybody that I've ever had sales calls with. So I could probably switch this to Airtable or Google Sheets. If you're looking at this, you don't need closed CRM to be doing this. I could probably switch this entire thing, honestly, to Google Sheets, and maybe I should do that. I pay like $50 a month for closed CRM, and this whole thing could be done with Google Sheets. So don't think that you need closed CRM for this. But all this is doing is literally just waiting for somebody to book a call on my calendar. And you can see we have all of these, operations. So if you wanted to know, my calendar actually has more people booking on it than I really want to. And so then it's literally this easy. You just set up the module the way that they say to, and then we're just passing the data over to close CRM. Now, when you're creating these modules, you can always click on the middle and you can create a filter. And so the filter that I've created here is this is watching my entire Calendly account for any event that happens in the entire Calendly account. And so I didn't want every single event that gets scheduled to be saved to my CRM, because a lot of times customers just use my Calendly to just book some time and we just talk about their campaigns and things like that. I didn't want, so many duplicates being added to my CRM because of that. So then what we did is I put this filter here and I made my Calendly, anytime I have a sales call, I call it a growth chat. And so what we're doing here is we have the scheduled event name and we're saying that we want it to contain growth. And then the only way that it'll pass by this is if it contains growth, right? And so it'll just send everything through there. So having a filter so that you can either block data from going through or only send certain data, which I guess I just said two things, but they both mean the same thing. Using filters in between the modules, that's how you can really get that done. And now we're just going to bounce around with some other scenarios that I've set up. So this is our Smartlead Analytics Google Sheet database workflow, which you can tell from the name. I guess I didn't need to repeat that. So what this workflow does, and when I said in the beginning of the video, I'm afraid of making this, is because I hope I don't dox an API key while we're doing this. But I just want to explain this workflow so you can kind of understand what is going on here. And so what we're doing first here is we're querying every campaign in our Smartlead account, and we're getting all the campaign IDs, and we're getting everything with this one module here. Now, we have 990 campaigns in our Smartlead account, mostly because I never delete them because I just always want to have the data and we delete the leads later, right? But so the problem with this workflow, and I'm just going to call this out, is one thing that I don't like about make.com is it only runs things for 45 minutes. And so if you go above 45 minutes, you start having issues. So then I've built multiple workflows to fix the 45-minute issue, and we'll get into that. But this is our kind of master Smartlead Analytics Google Sheet database. And so first we're using the API from Smartlead's API docs, which if you don't know how to read API docs, you could just ask ChatGPT. You can find the one that you want to make happen, and then you can ask ChatGPT how to make it happen. And so then we just enter the HTTP over here, which I can't open because it has my API key in it. And so we open the HTTP request and we ping it, and then we, get a bunch of data. We're going to get 990. If I were to hit this, and another thing is in Make, you can hit run this module only, which I still can't do because the result will show my API key, but we could hit run this module only and we'll get a list of all of the 990 campaigns that I have in Smartlead. This is a perfect example of when you would use an iterator, because if I were to just pull this result and then send it here, only one of those campaigns would pass through, and I want all of them. So we, anytime in make.com, and maybe later on we'll query something that has this issue. I just can't query this. Anytime something in make.com in the results section over here says array, you use an iterator to change it from an array into a single line, I don't know, push or something. Like it's just into single line data requests, right? Like I said, I'm not a make.com expert. I don't even know how to code. I'm just trying to help people that wish that they could do more complex things in make.com. And so then what we do is we iterate it and then we search it in Google Sheets. Now this part is really important because what I don't want to do is I don't want to set up this workflow and it just continuously keeps adding Smartlead campaigns over and over and over and over again, because then we're going to have a super long Google Sheet and it's just going to be crazy. So what we do here is we search and we see if the campaign ID from the Smartlead API request matches the campaign ID in any of the campaigns that we already have in the Google Sheet. And then what this router does is it says if the row number, so if you search the rows and the campaign ID exists, that means that a row number is going to come with that as well. And I think I could query this one. I don't think this is going to be a problem. I don't know any of our campaign IDs, so if I just guessed that right, that would be wild. But see how total number of bundles, 0, that means that a row didn't exist for that campaign ID. And so when we come here, see how it says row number, oh no. When we come here, see it says row number does not exist. So if a row didn't exist, it would go through this router and then it would say, oh, the row doesn't exist. We're going to go through this workflow. And so this workflow adds a row to the Google Sheets and then it searches the row. And I kind of am curious of why it searches the row. I forget why I built this. And then it goes with the rest of the workflow. Now, what I will say is I'm the first person to admit that I actually most likely built this highly inefficiently. And so let me just finish this actually. So if the row number doesn't exist, we will add the row to the workflow. And then this is an API request to get all of the data yesterday for the Smartlead analytics, because this data is going to give us all the data as an overview of the campaign. But in particular, I wanted all the data yesterday, all the data 7 days ago, and then all the data 30 days ago, and then the top line analytics as well. So like just the averages of everything. And then we update the Google Sheet row because it's already been added over here, right? So again, I know I talk fast and it might not be that clear. So I'm just going to be very, very direct with it. So if the row does not exist inside of the Google Sheet spreadsheet, we add that row and then we query the data for the yesterday data, the 7 days ago data, the 30 days ago data, and then the overall campaign analytics. Once we have all of that data, it updates the Google Sheet and we get all of that data. Now, the reason I do that is because when I had like 12 customers, I had one customer where their open rate on their campaign was like 60% or something, and as an average, but they weren't getting leads. And so then I was like, wow, that's funny. Their open rate is 60%, whatever. I'll just, come back to it later. And then they still weren't getting leads. And so then I clicked on the campaign and their open rate was 10%, but because they had such a high open rate for such a long time, and now they're like their domains got spammed, I didn't notice. And so that's why we track everything on a total average, a 30-day, a 7-day, and a yesterday time period, so that we can track how everything is trending completely. And so the way that we get all of those dates is we use these set variables. And so this is the most inefficient part of this workflow that I built, that it's not necessary the way that I did this. And what's not necessary is I'm using set variable here, but if you go in here, see how you can set multiple variables? All this is doing, and I can show this, all this is doing is literally just formatting the date so that when I enter it into Smartlead request, it's like, so this is the date for yesterday, right? And then this is the date for 7 days ago. This is the date for, today. So this is a sleep, which we'll talk about that in a second. And then this is the date for like 28 days ago, right? I guess it wasn't 30, whatever. You guys call me. And so you could just use the set multiple variables and just get that done. Again, I actually had to use ChatGPT to figure out how to write this because I had no clue how this variable value thing worked. So this is a perfect example of when I use ChatGPT to write these things. And so anyway, then you'll see that we also have a sleep variable over here, and we have it sleep for 1 second. The reason we have it sleep for 1 second is because the Smartlead API has 60 requests per minute, and if you run this too quickly, you're going to start running into problems with the Smartlead API, which we're going to talk about how we overcome those as well too. And so you're going to start running into problems with the Smartlead API, and that's just going to happen. And I have a workflow to fix that because, again, I probably built these things too inefficiently, and if I were to go back, I would build it a little bit differently, but just to show you. And so we take a 1 second pause, so we're not hitting the Smartlead API too much and too crazy. And so then everything gets updated, and this is the same workflow down here. It's just if the row number does exist, then we just pull out that row number, and then we just update all of the data in here. And so then we run this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 1:31 in the morning. Just so that most likely we're not using the Smartlead API key and it's just all being updated over there. Now, like I said before, sometimes we will have issues where either the runtime went over 45 minutes or we hit the Smartlead API too many times, and then we're going to get like a, you've exceeded your 60 requests per minute, whatever thing there. And so what we do, or result there. And so then that'll get added to the Google Sheet, and that's not helpful to anybody. So what this workflow does is it looks at all of the active campaigns and it fixes only the columns that have not been updated today. So what this does is it sets the variable for today. So we could view this. So it sets the variable for today, and then it searches the Google Sheet for anything that the status of the campaign is active and it has not been updated today. So not equal to today's date. So today's date is set right here. And then, so this is how, in this workflow, we're kind of just updating everything, but this is also why we run this every 3 days, because what this really does really well is just keeps all of my numbers really up to date in aggregate, and it also adds new campaigns. Like when we put new campaigns into Smartlead, it adds them in, which I don't really need them to the minute to be in there because we have another workflow that does it to the minute. And so with this, so when we run this and we make sure that it's running every 2 hours, and to make sure that every single row that has an active campaign in it, it was updated today, this is how we do it. And so the reason I run it every 2 hours is because if there's a problem and we need more and it goes over the 45 minutes, we're going to run this again and we're still going to activate all of them. But we're not wasting operations. So make charges you by operations. We're not wasting operations on this, because if everything's been updated, then it just all ends right here because everything was updated. So that's why I have it running every 2 hours, because I'd rather just, have it all updated. So again, the whole workflow works exactly the same way, but what you'll see is because we're only looking at active campaigns, we didn't need that router to choose between adding a row and updating a row, because if it's an active campaign, it's already in the Smartlead database in our Google Sheet. And so this is what we're doing here. So this is all the same workflow that you saw before. Now, the only thing that's different about this workflow is we are keeping in mind that potentially we are hitting the Smartlead API too often. So what we've done is anytime there's a Smartlead file request, or anytime we ping the Smartlead API, the file size should be over 100 bytes or whatever it is. And if it's below 100 bytes, that's going to be a 400 error. So when you're querying an API, if you don't know, a 200 error, or no, a 200 result usually means that everything went well and you're good and it all happened. Usually, Pork Bun does some crazy stuff that they'll give you a 200 and it didn't work, but whatever. If you get a 400 error, then that means that something went wrong. And with Smartlead, most often it's because you went over the API limits. And so what we have here is a conditional statement, so that if the file size of the API call is under 100 bytes, then we don't allow it to add to the Google Sheet here. Because if it was under 100 for any of them, see we have all like 48, 40, 39, which all correlates with the modules over here. If any of them are below 100, then we're not adding them to the Google Sheet over here because the data isn't going to be correct. There's going to be some mess up with the data. So then we route it down here, and I didn't need to reset the day. I don't know why I did that. I think maybe I just copied and pasted what was going on here, but I didn't need to reset the day. I don't know why I did that. And then we try to run it again because the odds that we're going to get it back to back is almost zero. And then we just ping it in, and we just the odds that we're going to get a API error back to back is almost zero. So that's why we're then just going to push it in over here. But even if we do have a problem, no, this is the same thing. Sorry. So then this, just real quick, again, I'm not the most efficient make.com builder. With some of the email deliverability problems that have been going around lately, we know that we're having problems if we see bounce rates increase. And so some days I wasn't being notified about the bounces until the next day. So I just built this really quick to just add a new sheet for just checking that all of the campaigns today got stats for today. So you'll see this got updated for today, and then we just ping Smartlead for today's information. Nothing really new here. I just want to see if there's other things that we could go over real quick. All right, so now I always like to have two places for the data to exist in our workflow. So we use ClickUp for all of our project management, but that also makes ClickUp our campaign dashboard as well too. And so I like to have all of the data backed up in the Google Sheet of all of our Smartlead data, but we also send a completely separate API request for the campaigns that are in ClickUp. So when we're using ClickUp, and maybe I can show this real quick, when we're using ClickUp, we basically have this operating system. We have all of these campaigns, right? And so inside the campaign, it'll have, like, this campaign isn't finished yet, but so we have the Smartlead URL, we have the Clay URL, and we have the Apollo TAM link over here, and we have the copywriting. So now what this workflow allows us to do is, instead of just relying on the Google Sheet being correct, which maybe I should trust the Google Sheet, but I just wanted to make sure that this data is correct every single day. Instead of just hoping that the Google Sheet is correct, we have this ClickUp function where we list out all of the tasks in our campaign file inside of, or folder inside of ClickUp. We parse the text and then we pass it into the Smartlead API request, where, because we have the campaign ID in the request over here, so I think I can open this up. Again, this is something that I use ChatGPT for because I have no clue how this gets me what I wanted, but ChatGPT told me and it works. So that's just the way it is. And so see how we have this custom field campaign URL? And so for this API request, all we need to do is just put in the campaign ID, and every campaign URL has the campaign ID. So we just parse it with this over here, and then we make our request. Then we get all of the data. But right here, see how, again, we're doing this file size blocker because I don't want any bad data going into our ClickUp. So then whenever we get that data, we push it in, and then it updates the ClickUp task right here using this workflow. Then in ClickUp, I don't really care about knowing about the 7-day data and the 30-day data when I'm looking at things very quickly in ClickUp. I just want the yesterday data. So then we'll also push the yesterday data into our ClickUp over here. And so this is the exact same workflow as over here, but we're just pushing it with the yesterday data. And the only reason we have an ignore here is sometimes we hit the ClickUp API too fast, and then if there's a problem, then it shuts down the entire thing, and we don't want to shut down the entire thing, so we just ignore it up here. And so this is how we get the per campaign data of everything that we need into our ClickUp dashboard. And so this is just another way to be thinking of it. But so now I have redundancies. I have the data in our Google Sheet that's getting updated every single day, and then I have it in our ClickUp, and it's being updated every single day as well. And then we're also monitoring it. This reruns daily every day at 1:57, and then I made a duplicate of this, and it also, which again, I didn't need to make a duplicate. Sometimes I do stupid things in make.com. You can make this scenario run, you know, like at regular intervals. Oh yeah, if I made it run at regular intervals, I could have done every 12 hours and it would have gotten me exactly what I wanted as well too. But say lovey, what I did is I just made a clone of this and I just made it run instead of at 1:57 p.m. I made it run at like 1:57 a.m. Right, whatever. And so now this is how we keep all of our campaign statistics in ClickUp on a per campaign level, completely updated at all times. Now, again, if we don't have the data, if this goes over 45 minutes to run, or the data from Smartlead had an error, again, we have this one where I call it Hammer Smartlead Analytics, just because, I don't know, this is just what I call it. And this is actually kind of a mess. What the heck? And so now what we do here again is we set the variable for today, and then we list out all of the tasks, and then we want to find any variable or any task in the campaign folder over here, which actually this hasn't been updated in a little while. Whoops, this is my only pet peeve with the ClickUp thing, is you have to come in here and for some reason you have to refresh it every day or very often, and I don't understand why. But see how this runs every 2 hours? And so it's going to just make sure that every single day these tasks have been updated. And so again, this doesn't waste our operations, because if it wasn't updated today, I want to pay for it to be updated, which you're not paying very much. But even if it was updated, then it's not passing through. And so again, this is just another way that we keep redundancies within the company. And this is a workflow that is going to be a little bit more of teaching. And so, or I have more of an opportunity to teach. And so this is our analytics on demand workflow. And so every workflow that you've seen so far, except for the Calendly one, basically you either schedule it to run and it just runs on its own. It's querying a database, getting the data, and then pushing whatever other enrichments you want. In this one, what we're doing here is we're waiting for a webhook to happen, and then we're pushing data through. So this webhook in particular, in ClickUp, you can make an automation that when a box is checked on a task, it sends a webhook, and that's what happens. So we have a box to check that is called Run Analytics Update, because sometimes we might change the campaign and we just want to make sure that the leads are being updated correctly. So then we check the box, it sends the webhook, and then it's the same thing that we were telling everyone before, where we're just getting all of the campaign statistics. We're just pushing all of those campaign statistics again. But this, instead of waiting for it to be scheduled, you could just click a box and it just happens right there. And so then that's just what's happening in here. This one is one of my favorites because it helps us make sure that all of our inboxes have custom domain tracking inside of Smartlead, which is super important. And it also has a bunch of different interesting things about make.com. So the first thing is this input data, which I'm not going to open this. This contains the our Smartlead API key and some other stuff. And so this we could just change very quickly to just move things around. Then what happens is this is a repeater. And so what this repeater does is it so see how it's labeled send requests multiple times to the API? You can set, and I hope, actually I'm going to pause because I don't want this to give anything away. Okay, I'm silly. That was nothing. So you can repeat your request as many times as you want with this repeater over here. And so the reason why this is important is because the Smartlead API, if you query your inboxes from the Smartlead API, it only will give you 100 of those of your inboxes back to you. And when you're doing this, sometimes we upload like 300 inboxes in a day. So that is not going to work for us to just get 100 back. So then what this does is we'll run 100 through the workflow. And then when 100 have gone through the workflow, then it'll come back and it'll repeat it, and it knows to repeat it 30 times. Now, I'm not wasting anything by repeating it 30 times, because see how we have this filter over here, no custom domain tracking. If it has the custom domain, I've only wasted like the operation here to just check if it has a custom domain, but it's not doing anything, right? Like it's not passing through the rest of these. And then we're just waiting for 3 seconds just because of the Smartlead API rate limit. So that's just another thing to call out. But so then this iterator, that's another important thing that I really want to show you how this works. So let me just pause and get this set up a little bit. Okay, so I think I can share this. I'm going to try to be very careful. So see how it says array in this data? If so, and then we have like all of this data, right? Like 100 things, right? And so because it says array there, if you try to pass it without this iterator, then you're only going to do the first one and it's not going to do any of the ones after that. So this is the perfect time when an iterator comes in. And so that's what you want to be searching for. And so then we have, waiting for 3 seconds because of the Smartlead API, and then we just go from there. And so then let's see if we have any. Okay, so this is maybe one of my favorite workflows, maybe that I've ever created. I really love this workflow. And so this workflow, what this does is it automates a lot of the tasks that need to get automated when we first onboard a customer. And so actually, I'm just going to walk through and just show you exactly what happens. So all that happens is we have a watch for task over here, which is essentially like a webhook, but it's watching for any new tasks to be added to my customer folder in ClickUp. And then when that task is added, we need to get that task, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but when you watch for tasks, then it only sends a certain amount of data, and I want all of the data. So then we just pass the task ID from this result, and then we get this so that I can get all of the data. And then we have a text parser, which honestly, I forget what we're doing here. Oh, this one, it just removes any spaces or anything because we're going to be passing it on later. And then in this one, we're creating a Smartlead client ID so that we don't have to, remember to create their client ID. And then here is where we're passing an internal message to my team and we're saying, hey, this customer just got added. This is their Smartlead client ID. Keep a lookout. A customer is being added right now. And then we automatically create a channel. That's why we need the text parser over here where we take out the spaces, because when you create a channel, Slack doesn't like you to have weird names and everything in it. So we create our channel over here. And then, so now the channel's been created. We are then going to edit our customer field inside of ClickUp with the custom with some of the data from here. So when we create the channel, I send that channel ID to ClickUp because one day I'd like to create an operating system where we automatically send updates to customers programmatically, and I need to have the channel ID of the customer Slack to be able to do that, right? So that's how we handle that there. And then nothing gets, the Smartlead client ID gets passed over here because we're doing a lot of lookups with that client ID. So we just pass that automatically. Then we create another message where now we're sending a message to that new channel. And in this new channel, I'm sending their Smartlead login. And then somebody sent me a video on this, which I really appreciated them. I haven't implemented it yet, but it's kind of annoying to invite people programmatically as a Slack connection request inside of make.com. So we send, an automated reminder of like that client's email address. We just put it in there. So it's super easy to just copy and paste and add them to that Slack channel. We have their Smartlead client login as well. And then we say, this is a quick overview of how Smartlead works. And I send them a Loom video because everybody just wants to see it. Right. And so then we invite users on my team, so I don't have to remember to do that. Then we use AI to come up with like 15 domain suggestions for them super quick. We send that message to Slack as well. And then this one, I know. I was like, what? I don't want to call this one out here. And so then what this one does is it takes all of this data and it posts the data to a clay table that we have that actually writes a lot of copywriting for people, and it just passes all of the data over there so that we can get that workflow kicked off. Then we're using this Google Sheet to create a spreadsheet from a template, because sometimes people don't like the way that the analytics look in Smartlead. So we create templates, like a Google Sheet data for them automatically. This Google Sheet link gets added to their ClickUp task right here. And then we also add them to our overall client customer database. We add them with this module over here as well too. So then it all just goes, flowing through everything. And then just like I said, we have a Google Sheet for all of our customers. And so now this one gets pretty meta, right? Because what we're doing is we have the Google Sheet of, I think this is our master database. Yes. So this is our master database Google Sheet where we're looking for clients and client IDs. Then we're looking in this one for anybody that has, for any campaign. So see how this says, all right. So this says client data, right? And in this one, this is total database. So I've got a client database and I have a campaign database. And so right here, we're looking for the client ID numbers. And then we're looking in the campaign database for anybody that has that client ID number, which you can see client ID equals to client ID, right? So then it's looking up that we're running 8 campaigns for them and it's going to bring back all of that data. Then for here, when we get the task, it's going to look up their Smartlead client ID in the original Google Sheet, and it's also looking it up in the Google database. And then when we get that task, we're going to get the Google Sheet ID over here, which is then going to be this value right here. And then that updates and adds a row of all of their data between the two Google Sheets. I know that one's a little bit crazy, but this is like one of my favorite workflows that we have here. So essentially, I've got 55 Google Sheets that all have all of the analytics that I track for all of the campaigns, but the clients only see their data in those Google Sheets. We have all of it being routed here. And the way that we can update them with such a simple workflow is because we're pulling the Google Sheet ID right here. So in ClickUp, we have their Google Sheet automatically generated from that onboarding flow. And then we have the Google Sheet link in the ClickUp task. So then we parse the ID and then we pass the ID here, because see how it says enter the spreadsheet ID? We pass that ID here, and then it just updates everything over here. This is one of my favorite workflows that we ever put together. And so then, this is another one where we just use a webhook, where this is just a ClickUp form fill, where so we send a webhook anytime that a form is filled out, which that form is right here, the GEX campaign launch form. Then we then we just fill out a form about a campaign. We retrieve all of the data about that campaign, because like I said, when you send the webhook, it's basically like, look, this ID, it just started, but it doesn't send you anything else. So we just get all of the data by using this ClickUp get a task one right here. Then here we add the campaign to Smartlead, and then we just reset the settings. Like by default, Smartlead doesn't have a time zone and it sends like 100 emails a day or something like that. And so by default, we want to set it to Eastern time and to send like 300 emails a day. So we automatically do that. So this is creating the campaign, and then this is changing the settings. And then we update the ClickUp task that my team is going to be working on with the Smartlead campaign link, so that they don't have to go searching for the campaign link. And then I honestly forget what this one does, and I don't want to dox our API key, but let me just check. Oh, yes. So then this just adds the subject lines and how many sequences we want in an email, just so that, again, my team doesn't have to do work that we've already automated, right? And so I would say this is a lot of the workflows that we use these workflows daily. Maybe there's some other ones that I can show you. Like we also we update DNS records and everything from Google Sheets by making API calls. That's some easy stuff. Hang on. This is another one where we are like checking inboxes. Let's see if we can jump into this one. Oh, this one's super simple. In this one, we're just checking the health of inboxes in Smartlead campaigns, and then we're just using this one to pull out all of the inboxes. Then we scrape the health of them because they don't have an API for that. And then in this one, we use this to delete all of the bad inboxes. That's just what's going on here. And so anyway, I hope a couple of things is one, this might be like more of a boring video, but I hope if you're looking to use make.com for running operating systems or helping with cold email campaigns or whatever it might be, this gave you ideas. When I was learning make.com, there was no video like this to show me what was possible and some things to be looking out for and things like that. Use ChatGPT as much as you can to help figure these things out, because some of them are crazy confusing without ChatGPT and, you know, all of that. So anyway, I hope this was useful, and let me know in the comments if you found it was useful, and we should have more make.com tutorials, because I know my channel is very heavy on the clay tutorials.